What's up, my bros? It's GL88 here, back with another video. Today I am going to be doing a review on another Soviet mask from my collection. Today I'm going to be doing an updated review on my GP4U kit, now that I have a complete kit. So I thought this would be, kind of just an interesting video to make. And I guess one thing here before I start the video, I know that this video is going to be published quite a bit later than I'm recording it. You see, at the time of recording this, the day before, I got a random-ass community guideline strike on my channel, which kind of pissed me off, and I can't upload for 6 more days at the time of recording this. It was for some random video I recorded 4 years ago, and it was taken down, which sucks. So I wasn't going to contest it or anything, so I guess I can't upload for a few more days, and you'll likely see this video out ahead of time in like a week or so. But yeah, I guess kind of getting into this video, I guess I'll go over the history of the GP4U here first. The history of the GP4U starts, well, in the mid-50s. You see, the GP4U was introduced right around 1955 to replace the GP4. Now, if you didn't know, the GP4 was the predecessor to the GP4U. Yeah, there is 2 different models of GP4. The original GP4 had a shorter hose that was made of an exposed black rubber, and it was meant to be chest carried. So a GP4 had a shorter hose. You know how the GP4U has a long hose that's stocking that coated? Well, the original GP4 had a shorter hose with a plain rubber hose that wasn't coated and stocking that. And it also came with a carry bag with a shorter shoulder strap, since it was meant to be chest carried on your chest. And it also had a different canister, the GP4 canister, which had, as far as I've heard, a lower quality of charcoal, and it wasn't as effective. So right around 1955, they introduced the GP4U to improve on the mask, which, I mean, the U did genuinely mean improved. So the GP4U was introduced. They elongated the hose and gave it a stocking net coating so that it was protected, and it also meant that you could wear the mask with the carry bag kind of more towards your hip or your waist, and so that improved it quite a bit. And it also had an improved canister. They introduced the GP4U canister as well alongside it, which had a better type of charcoal used in the canister that improved filtering life. And they also did change the body of the canister from a 6 rib to an 8 rib design, which is what I mean by that is, I'll show you here in a minute, but the canister has these reinforcing ribs on the outside of the canister. Well, the GP4 canisters had 6 ribs on the outside, and the GP4U canister had 8 ribs on the outside. Not all GP4U canisters did have the 8 rib design, though. There were some that had the 6 rib designs. Though you really only saw that early on with the early GP4U filters, as, they were switching and they were still making, the GP4U canisters with the 6 ribs, since the machines weren't, tooled to do the 8 rib designs yet on the sheet metal stamping thing. So, yeah, the GP4U was introduced right around then with all them, differences in the kit, and they were produced from 1955 to 1974, so almost 20 years this mask was produced, which is, quite a long time. And they did have a few minor differences in the GP4U throughout its production run. This one right here is a late pattern GP4U. It has a few differences in the mask that are, different than the earlier GP4Us, which I'll have to show off here. But yeah, this mask was produced from 1955 to 1974 and saw issue all the way throughout the 70s and even into the early 80s a bit. So I guess there's kind of an interesting thing to note. There isn't too much else for me to talk about here. These masks, like I said, were kind of just issued as a standard issue civilian mask from the 50s all the way up to the 80s. And basically they were retired out of service right around then, and were mostly replaced by the GP5 starting in the 70s. So, yeah, I guess there isn't too much else for me to talk about here on the history. So I guess I'll kind of just, get on to what I have here. Like I said, this is a late pattern GP4U. This was made basically towards the end of production. You can see the carrier here, which is made of a rugged canvas. You got the shoulder strap here, which is really long since this is the GP4U style carrier with the longer strap so that it can be carried at the waist. You can see the buckles here have like a special finish on them so that they are corrosion resistant. You can see the shoulder strap here, which is kind of an off sand gray color. Typically they're the same color as the carrier, but this one is interesting because it's kind of more of a sand color, while the carrier is more of a mustard brown. But you can see the front here with the single button closure, which this is just a little steel disc that keeps the flap closed there. On the back here, you have a simple waist cord, just made out of a simple cheap piece of fabric, and then it just loops around this little D-ring right here, and you tie it off. Nothing too crazy. There isn't much else to note on the outside of the carrier. It's pretty simple and cheap, as a civilian mask should be. So I guess opening up this flap here, you can hopefully see some stamps. I don't know how well it'll show up on camera, but there's some stamps right there on the front. This carrier is dated 1968. It would appear, it appears to be August 1968, so I guess that would be the month of production there, because it's got 8 in Roman numerals and then 1968 stamped on it, so I'm gonna guess that's probably the date of production. There's an OTK inspection stamp. I guess there isn't too much else to note on the actual flap itself here, so you can see that I have the mask stored in the carrier here. So I guess I'll kind of just pull out the mask and real quick here and a few other things. So got the canister, and pull that out here, and then I'll see if I can pull out the anti-fog pencil, since I have the anti-fog pencil for this mask. Alright, so I guess showing off the carrier here if I can, you can see that it's got 2 compartments in there. The bigger compartment is for the mask, and the smaller one's for the filter. In the bottom of the filter compartment, there are 2 wooden blocks to help support the canisters so that it doesn't suck in the fabric of the carrier, so it helps improve breathing resistance. You can see in the actual divider here, there is a small pouch for the anti-fog pencil. But otherwise, there isn't too much else to note about this carrier. It's very simple and cheap to produce, as it should be. You can see there's some rust stains on the carrier from storage, but nothing too crazy. So I guess I'll just set the carrier out of the way here and kind of show off the rest of the stuff here. So here we got the anti-fog pencil. I believe this is a later pencil. This didn't come with the mask. I had it laying around, so I threw it with it. But you can see the anti-fog pencil here, and this is just like a crayon that is made out of this waxy material that you would end up wiping on the lenses, and it would help keep the mask's lenses from misting up while you're wearing it, which this mask does need. There are no TSO deflectors in this mask, and it does fog up pretty bad, so it is definitely a necessity to have this with the kit. So I can see why they issued it back then. I guess next off here we got the filter. This is your GP4U filter. This actual canister uses the early style canister body with the 6 ribs instead of 8, which is kind of interesting because this canister is a late production canister. This one is dated 1968, which is like over 10 years after they changed the canister design. And pretty much all the canisters by this point were using the updated 8-rib design, so it's kind of weird seeing a canister dated this late with only 6 ribs, unlike the 8 that was more common at that time. So I guess that's kind of just a little interesting thing to note, because it actually has the canister body of a GP4 canister, even though it's a late production GP4U filter. These come in two different shades of color. There's this one, which is mustard brown, and there's also a gray. I've heard some people say the gray canisters are the early canisters, but that's kind of bogus. Because the gray and mustard brown canisters were produced alongside each other for the entirety of the production span. There's GP4 filters made in both gray and mustard brown, and there's also GP4U filters that are made in gray and mustard brown. It doesn't actually mean anything by the production year or anything. It's just that they used both mustard brown and gray primers for the for painting the canister. But yeah, I guess there isn't too much else to note here. Maybe I can get a close-up of the stamps there, but it says GP4U. And then it's got a date of August 1968, like the carrier. They got some stuff on the bottom there. There's some stamps on there. Some stamps on the top. The canister's got a little bit of rust on it, but it's nothing major. I guess one more thing before moving on the mask. I actually have the original instruction manual. Let's see, what does this say? It says instrukcja. Let's see, po. Let's see. Okay, you know what? I'm not even gonna read this. I am practicing Russian. I can kind of read this, but I still like really need to I guess practice some more before I can really kind of pronounce crap better. But it says instruction on use gas mask GP4U. It says that right there, and then on the bottom there it says Moskva or Moscow, and then 1956. And then up here on the top there's like in some person's handwriting it actually says the city of Kirovograd, Ukraine on it, which is kind of interesting. So this manual came from Ukraine. I do actually remember buying it from Ukraine, but clearly this was probably issued somewhere in Ukraine, or you know, like sometime at like someplace in Kirovograd, Ukraine, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, you can see just like the cover, and then it just opens up here, and then you got all your sorts of instructions. It says that it was handed over to the publishing office on November 22nd, 1956. And I believe the date on this specific manual is the 21st of June, 1967. And then you can see the kind of crap on the mask. You know, they have a description of it, and then sizing charts, and, you know, stuff of the sorts like that. And then also it tells you how to put the anti-fog on the lenses properly. It actually shows you the pattern that you're supposed to wipe the stick on the lens. Then it also talks about how you're supposed to properly put on the mask and everything, and the different positions. You got the, they call this one right here the marching position, which just means that the carrier is kind of on your back there and not really at, you know, at the ready position. This is the, what do they call it? This is, I forget. I think they call this the prepared position, if I recall correctly, and then they call this the prepared position combat. But it just tells you the different ways that they would carry it. So, like, if there really wasn't a threat of an attack, they just have it slung around their back. If there was a possibility of a chemical attack, they would have it slung up there with the flap unbuttoned, and it would be tight. The waist cord would be tied around your waist, and then obviously you got the combat position where he's wearing the mask. And then it tells you how to properly adjust the mask and everything. And then also right here it talks about the GP4 a little bit. So there you can see what a GP4 would look like. As you can see, it would be, the carrier would be on your chest and the hose would go up like that. Then it tells you how to take it off. You know, it goes all over everything here. There isn't too much else to talk about, just a bunch of, whatever, instruction related stuff, obviously. So I guess kind of getting onto our mask here. Here is the GP4 itself. As you can see, like usual, it's made out of a green rubber. I couldn't tell you if this is natural rubber or not. It's made out of a green rubber. Some of these were made in a gray latex rubber, though very few were produced out of it. And I'm guessing more than anything, it was probably likely that they ran out of this green rubber and they just started using gray latex, or maybe they were just experimenting with gray latex. But very few of them were made out of that gray latex material, and the vast majority are made out of this green rubber. Some people will say there's a black rubber variant of this mask. There isn't. It's just that when these masks are discolored from sunlight, they turn black, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, you can see, I guess, kind of just the relative shape of the face piece. This one's a bit deformed, but it's, you can still kind of see what the relative shape of it would be. Interestingly enough, they use green tape around the mask here, which is kind of aesthetic. I kind of like it. You can see that the head harness here is the late pattern simplified harness. You see there's two different types of harnesses that were used on the GP4U. There's the original style that I think you see a bit more often, which has a actual rubberized back pad. And there's the simplified version, which is this, where they remove the back pad and they just have the straps sewn in a way so that it kind of forms like a rest for the back of your head. I've heard that this was introduced like this to help with fit, because I heard that the earlier head pad had problems with making a seal properly. I heard that, and that could be possible, but it also could just be possible that it was expensive, and they just simplified it to make it cheaper to produce. You can see some inspection stamps right there, maybe. The top two straps are adjustable, and it's a non-elastic cloth material. And then right here you have the elasticated straps right here, which actually, interestingly enough, the way that they have it designed is you pull at these two bottom straps right here. These actually adjust down here at the bottom. You pull those, and it actually adjusts the bottom and side straps, which is kind of a smart way of doing it. So all you do is pull them bottom straps, and it adjusts both of these straps, or right here. And it actually does work pretty efficiently, and it is actually quite a nice design. But yeah, they changed that from a rubberized, back pad to a simplified harness like this. And also, right around the early '60s, they changed the buckles here. You see, on the original GP4Us, the buckles were molded into the rubber, which meant that if they were damaged, you couldn't replace them, and it rendered the mask useless. Well, on this model, they kind of molded this little piece so that the buckle could just be put over it, and it meant that it could be replaced if it needed to be, which is kind of nice. They introduced that right around the early '60s. The updated head harness, it seems like they introduced right around 1967 or '68. It really only showed up late into the GP4U's production span. But those are really the main differences between an early and late GP4U. The only other thing to note is that on the outlet valve assembly here, which, as you can see, this is a pretty beefy, valve assembly here. It's got a dual outlet valve, but the outlet valve cover actually has less holes on it, interestingly enough. On the early GP4Us, the entire valve cover here would have holes on it, but on this variant, it has some holes, but it has this just blank spot right there in the middle, which is a bit interesting. I couldn't tell you why they did that. Maybe it was to help with protection of the valve. I couldn't tell you, or maybe it was just to cheapen things up. I really don't know. But yeah, those are really all the differences between an early and a late GP4U. They just changed up the head harness and that valve, the outlet valve assembly there. But you can see the long hose that this mask is known for. Like I said, the GP4 would have a shorter hose that was not stocking net coated. It'd just be plain black rubber. You can see the thread on the end here, which actually does rotate, albeit it doesn't like doing it on mine, but it does rotate to screw on and off canisters, which is kind of nice. You can see the date on my mask here, maybe. I know that the lighting isn't the greatest, but my mask is a size 1, and it was made in Tambov MASH, so the Tambov chemical plant, in the first quarter of 1968. I think Tambov is probably the least, the least common manufacturer of this mask. There's 3 that I know of. There's Moscow, there's Yaroslavl, which is the most common manufacturer, and there's Tambov. I seem to see the Tambov ones the least, and all the Tambov ones I've seen have been made in 1968, like this one, which is kind of weird, but yeah. And this one is part of batch number 82. So I guess that's really all to mention about that. I guess I'll show off the interior of the mask real quick, and then I suppose I could put it on for y'all. So here you can see the interior of the mask, maybe. You can see that there is no TSO deflectors. Can I get a light? I don't think I can. Well, crap. But you can see the inside of the mask there. You can see the lenses. And then you can see that there's a bit of a chin rest there for your chin. And then down there you can see the valve assembly, which right there is your intake. Right there, you can see that. The air comes in through there. It doesn't really demist the lenses, and then it goes out through the outlet valve down there. Pretty simple design. It works just fine for a civilian mask. Now you can see that this mask was very expensive to produce, which was probably the main reason why the GP5 replaced this, because, I mean, the GP5 is cheap as hell. I don't think you could make a gas mask cheaper, honestly. But this was pretty expensive, so they replaced it with the GP5. So yeah. I guess I could put this on for you guys real quick, and then wrap up the video, since I know you guys probably want to see me put it on, and I can do it here since I'm just right here. So, just putting this on. Oh. And then also I forgot to mention that when you don't have a filter on, it makes this dumb buzzing noise. It's a bit stupid, but I mean, whatever. I can kind of see this mask is maybe a little bit small for me. It's not horrible. I probably could go for a medium, which is kind of a first, because I'm very much a size small person, but this mask is actually a bit smaller than I would have expected. But yeah, as you can see, the mask makes this dumb buzzing noise. It does that because there's less resistance with the mask when you don't have a canister on. You see, the inlet valve actually like kind of vibrates when there's no canister attached because of the airflow, and it'll make that weird buzzing noise when you breathe out, which is kind of weird. But yeah, you can see that the wet mask is fogging up pretty bad. It probably is pretty hard to hear me if you even can right now. I honestly don't know if I'm talking loud enough. But yeah, the mask, the mask actually does fit half decent. It does make a seal, as you can see. I know people complain about this not sealing right, and I just have a feeling they probably aren't adjusting the mask properly, but as you can see, this one seals to my face just fine. So yeah, I guess there isn't too much else to note here, so I'll just take this thing off. So, I guess there's that. As you can see, this is a relatively high quality and decent, civilian gas mask. It's probably one of the highest quality civilian masks the Soviet Union has ever produced. It's made with a lot of quality in mind. But obviously that kind of also means it's expensive, and you can kind of see why the GP5 replaced it. I guess it makes sense for a economy standpoint. Making this was probably pretty expensive, so introducing the GP5 probably meant you can make a hell of a lot more of them for way cheaper and way faster. So yeah, I guess I don't really have much else to talk about here, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for some more videos soon. I might even record a few more of these ahead of time, I couldn't tell you. But I'll see you guys again when, I'm unbanned from posting, and I'll see y'all later.